Hello there, people of the internet. My name is Udur Jagero, and this is Dialogues with Jagero. And today I am with Ankiza talking about parenting. It's very difficult to know what it is in a kid's mind. And a lot of us, first of all, welcome to the program, Ankiza. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I have to say that I'm excited to be here, and I really welcome this conversation, a much-needed conversation.
I have a daughter that is 7 years old, going to 8 in January. These days, she does a lot of things like an adult would do. She takes her dishes back to the kitchen. She asks me questions. If I forget to tell her bye, she follows me and tells buddy bye, But to be very honest with you, I'm very clueless on how to deal with her. I think her mother is doing a better job than I am doing right now. But first of all, I want to ask you. I'm going to ask you about what do you think is the status of parenting right now in our society. But before that, let's talk about who you are. Your name is Ankiza. The second name is very difficult to pronounce. How do you pronounce
Gakunu.
it? Gakunu. What is your story? Where did you grow up? Who are you? So that the audience can size you up.
Okay.
Yes.
So let me start by saying I am a parent too. Yeah. I am a mother. I am a wife. I have a background in psychology and sociology. So I was always very curious. I grew up in the heart of Europe, which is known as Belgium, Brussels, and I was a minority. So I became very fascinated by why do people do what they do. If you have ever been a minority or part of a minority group in a society, you will face very many interesting things, right? We come across discrimination, we come across racism, we come across very many feelings and things. And that really prompted me to want to understand why do people do what they do. So I began my journey there. I graduated. I got a master's degree also from Portsmouth Business School. I later on became a certified neurolinguistic programming practitioner known as NLP, a life coach. And I am currently running a digital mental well-being platform called Inuka Africa. But really, my passion is the next generation. I mean, the kids are our future, right? So if there's one job we should try to get right, is this parenting business.
Yeah. What is NLP?
So neuro-linguistic programming is all about figuring out how do we achieve certain results for ourselves, yeah? So we have different ways of internal communication and external communication. And NLP really just breaks it down in a very simplistic way so that you're better able to understand yourself in order to get the results you want. And that can be in any area, including parenting, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So you grew. You said that there is a lot of things that was going on as a minority when you're living in Europe. How did this manifest?
So it came across, especially as a child. Let me start off by saying I was once a child myself, right? And I didn't have the language. So it took much later on and with my studies to understand, this is what you call discrimination, or somebody calling you names because you look different, or a teacher having a bias and assuming because you come from an immigrant background, perhaps you are less smart or less able or capable. So it manifested even in how I would be marked in school or graded, etc. So it really came out in this shape or form, but I did not have the language growing up. Yeah.
When these guys came here to Kenya, they are called expatriates. When we go the other side, we are called immigrants. Do you know why?
I'm sure we could get into...
Because I don't think... It's very interesting, right?
Yes. I mean, we all know a bit about geopolitics, right? And it was very much that we were colonized. We were, sort of perceived as being a bit inferior. So you find that dynamic still happens. You can be a very accomplished person going abroad, but yes, you're still called an economic immigrant or migrant. You are not seen as an expatriate. Yeah.
Talking about children, what is it? What do you think? I want to ask you two questions. What do you think is? What are we struggling with right now in the society as people who are caretakers of children? What is your overview? Understanding of what is going on in terms of, are we parenting properly? Are we struggling with it? In your field, what is going on right now?
Yeah. So I really want to make this conversation more relatable by saying that I don't believe there is such a thing as a parenting expert.
Yeah.
Yeah. Parenting is a social experiment. So what is a social experiment, right? It is just simply an experience people have where we want to observe how do people react. Yeah. So there is no theory. There is no specific input we can do in order to get an output from our children. So that's important to start off with. Now, regarding what is going on, there was a very interesting study done by Pew Research Institute in America. And they have done long studies about the changing nature of parenting and families. And what they found is that 70% of parents who they sampled said that parenting is much harder today than 20 years ago. And the main issue they brought up was technology, right? Like social media and screens and tablets. This is what is the key thing today that is so hard. And it's because we are not sure of what is the harm, what is the long-term harm being caused by allowing our children to have access to technology.
What is the harm?
Yeah, And what's interesting, and this is why I say there are no experts, because parents know themselves. And most parents I have spoken to will say, we are concerned. We see behavioral issues, especially in younger children. We see early inappropriate exposure to images. I mean, let's say YouTube is now the emerging platform for children 2 and under. Can you imagine this? 2 and under. And so they are being exposed to inappropriate content. For the teenagers, we have also seen young girls especially are dealing with self-issues, body dysmorphia. I mean, Instagram alone, you don't even have to be a child to feel that, wow, where is my body looking like or fitting in this society today, right? And then, of course, we realize that there's a lot of unhealthy relationships being developed and a loss of connection. So especially with teenage kids, you find that they are on this online platform with little to no supervision, and they're not able to go back into the real world and form real meaningful relationships. And that impacts over long term their mental and emotional well-being.
As a parent, you have correctly said that there is no specific way of parenting. But I think there are guidelines, there are basics. Because if I am having a child, maybe at 22 years old, we got into a relationship, we had a child. What are some of the things that people should know about a child as they grow up? For example, from the point of giving birth, how do you progress from taking this care of this child to all the way to teenage life? What are some of the sort of, for a lack of a better word, do's and don'ts that you should be able to, or the things that you should be aware of? Yeah.
I think primarily, and I always take it back to the parent, and let me ask you, Jagero, what would you say is something as a human that you crave or long for?
A better life. A better life. The rush in Nairobi and the pressures of Nairobi is becoming unbearable day after day. And I think that for me is what, for the last 3 years, I've been thinking so much about whether I really belong in this city or whether I should be here, because I have an acre of land in my village, which I have been developing for some time. And I have always really wondered, because I feel like the town is becoming very toxic to my health. I am always under pressure with phone calls every day. Shooting a podcast is not easy. A lot of things going on. So if you give me back my life, then basically you'll be giving me back my village.
Yeah.
And
you use the key word there, a better life.
Yes.
And what I understand by that is a life of meaning. And ultimately, when we dig down to what is a life of meaning, it's a life of love and connection. And your child wants nothing more from you than connection. So the number one thing I would tell the 22-year-old parent is make sure you have a connection with yourself and a level of self-awareness so that you are better able to connect with the other, and that is your child. And as long as a child feels that they belong in your presence, most of the other things will fall into place. Yeah, the most powerful thing a parent can do is make sure that the child feels they want to belong to you. And that is how you hold on to power as a parent. It's not through authoritarian ways and dogmatic ways and militant ways. It's by making sure that you give enough space for that child to feel heard, seen. And you mentioned freedom, the idea of going to your acre of land. We are all trying to raise here, let me just say this, autonomous human beings who respect themselves, respect others, and who love and are connected to the world, right? So if we reverse engineer from that, like this is the goal we want, and we're reverse engineering, autonomy, where does that come from? It's allowing children to play, to be free, to be heard, to be seen, the basic fundamentals. Where does respect come from of self? It comes from acknowledging that child and their unique abilities, right? And that positive affirmations and talks that we give to our children. And then where does the connection and love come from? Again, it comes from showing and doing. Our children rarely become what we want them to become. They become who we are and who we show them that we are.
That's interesting. I want to go back to the 22-year-old that you talked about, telling them that they have to be in a relationship with themselves first before they can connect to their children. I think that goes, that is also true to people, whether you are 30 years or you're getting a child at 30 years old. Sometimes we don't even know each other. How do we go back to knowing each other? Because sometimes we want to raise a child and we were never raised.
Very, very true. And what I encourage a lot of people to do is when you go back, and maybe let's use you as an example, Jagero.
Yes, for sure.
I hope your mama or papa wouldn't mind us, digging a bit deeper.
Yeah.
But if I'm to look at the 8-year-old or 7-year-old, you mentioned your daughter is 8-year-old Jagero. What are some of the things that you believe you felt a bit empty about, or, now looking back, with hindsight, that you realize, oh, maybe I could have, benefited from a bit more of this or that from mom and dad?
I feel like at 7 years old, or just around 10, because that's what I can really remember properly, is that I don't think that I meant much to my parents. My mother was a housewife in the village. My father was an alcoholic accountant in Kisumu, And I feel like my mother was having a lot of pressure of taking care of us, because even though I mentioned that my father was an accountant, his money was, going a lot to the bottle. And he was not, there was no relationship between me and my father, really, except that he was my father. He was, he would rather be with his cousins drinking than be with us, And I think that my father did not think of us as humans, in the sense that not because I think my father was just like his father. His father was a very cruel man. The man that I'm calling myself, Jagero, he was a very cruel man, and he didn't have a lot of sympathy for people. And I think the way he raised my father is the way my father sort of started raising us. And so he was an alcoholic. He really loved the bottle. My mother was struggling to put food on the table, and that's all she cared about. She didn't have enough energy to get in to talk to us, to talk to me as a child. So feeding me was her primary goal.
Yeah.
The rest of my psychological or my emotional, needs were not a priority.
Yeah.
I think that is how I think.
And that is very profound,
Yeah.
and the story of so many people I come across with either addicted parents or parents who are incapable of helping their children in emotional ways. And I think that's the key thing that 22-year-old would need to know is parent yourself. So much of parenting we think is about parenting the child, but it's actually parenting your inner child. So you would need, for example, to address in yourself that emotional, maybe I can call abandonment or neglect, that there was no one to hold space for you growing up and help you master and work through your own emotions, right? So perhaps, and this could not be your story, but when we see kids acting out, all that acting out is that they are acting out what they are not able to physically or communicate with language. So kids acting out normally is all about emotions. So this could have been your story or not. Maybe even kids in that situation will act out, maybe be rebellious or whatever we want to call rebellious as teenagers, not listen, be very stubborn and maybe a bit defensive. So you need to go back and learn how to parent yourself and actually acknowledge and say, yes, I see myself, I hear myself, I don't need to feel uncomfortable with sitting even with my own emotions. And that will help you better parent, right? Because you are just simply giving to yourself what nobody else gave you. And this is what makes you a smarter and a better parent to your own child.
I think I still need to learn more about parenting myself. What does parenting yourself involve? What are some specifics? What are examples? Because I feel like, and I think most people will feel the same, that you don't know how to parent. How do you specifically parent yourself? I think there is something that they say inner shadow or whatever.
Shadow work.
Yeah. What is it?
Yeah. So, again, and this is it. Yeah. Nobody can answer those questions for you. And I think sometimes, especially in our society in Kenya, we have this idea that I will go to the doctor and you will fix me. Yeah. Nobody is coming to fix you and nobody is coming to save you. You are your own savior. So let us start there. So again, what we need to do is look back and reflect. Oftentimes we don't want to sit in uncomfortable feelings. We don't want to have conversations with maybe mom, dad, caregiver, whoever it is, yeah? And sit down and confront some of these ways of how we were brought up. And what did they do to our psychological and emotional self? Now, it doesn't mean we blame because we are adults, which means now we take accountability and responsibility. But it does involve, especially for men who tend to be very uncomfortable, it means sitting down and taking time. Sometimes if you have your 1 acre of land and you love nature, get out there, do a picnic, lay down, a nice meal or whatever, your favorite drink, and just take time and see what comes up. Yeah, see what comes up for you. And based on that, then you're better able to figure out, where do I have some gaps? And how is this showing up in how I parent? So in my case, for example, I mentioned I had also a very hard upbringing by being a minority. And I realized it made me a very defensive person. If you said one wrong thing to me, I would be quick to put you in your place. And I noticed early on in my parenting journey that I had very low tolerance levels. My child or my children would do something and I would find myself just lashing out. And I had to remind myself that, okay, so much of my upbringing was being in defense mode, was being in flight or fight mode. And that was not going to be something I wanted to pass on to my children. Yeah. And we've all heard about generational curses. So again, how are you breaking the cycle, Jagero? You mentioned your granddad and your dad and yourself, but at least you're at that stage of consciousness where you can say here on your podcast, I'm not sure. I don't know how. Whereas I'm sure your dad, grandpa, that's not a thought that would ever enter their mind. Yeah. So it's baby steps, but I think one, self-awareness, taking the time to sit in uncomfortable feelings, and then feeding yourself, giving yourself that emotional resilience, giving yourself that encouragement, and then now watching it with your own children.
There is what teachers are supposed to do, and then there are what parents are supposed to do. Do you feel like these days we have left a lot of work to be done by the teachers? And why is that the case? Because we feel like we don't know, or we feel like we are paying school fees and therefore parenting now belongs to the teachers?
Yeah. Let me call us all out, because we are all guilty. I mean, we are very distracted parents. Yeah. A perfect example is a lot of parents who come to me again about screen time. I'm like, how much time do you spend on your own screen? And what I found was over 70% of parents that I spoke to were distracted by screen time in the presence of their own children. So what are we communicating to our children already about our own time or our willingness to be involved with them? We're basically telling them, okay, this device is much more entertaining and interesting than you. And a lot of us, if we're honest, we're happy when our kids are away. Yeah. I mean, we send them off and they come back home. And why is that? Because it means we need to confront the very thing sometimes we're running away from. And children are just a reflection of ourselves, right? Whatever we do not like in our children is probably in us. So yes, we are giving a lot of responsibility to teachers, and that is not right. Teachers are there to impart certain subjects and knowledge. They are not there to instill morals, values, discipline. I mean, they are not there to build the whole human being. So as parents, again, what is that saying? I think we are uncomfortable. Not that we don't know, because again, most parents know. A lot of parents tell me and come to me and say, I know my child is spending too much time on screen time. I know this, and I know it's harmful. So why is it that we're doing that? We're doing it because we are the ones primarily addicted to the screen. Yeah.
I think I'm addicted to the screen now. What are the dangers of children getting addicted to the screen so early? Because if I look at my friends these days, most of them are having spectacles, and I think most of them, when the first thing they're being asked at the eye specialist is that how much time do you spend on your screen, and I think that it is because we are spending so much time on the screen that we are. What are the dangers for a child? First of all, with being exposed to the screen for long periods of time. And psychologically and even physically. Yeah.
So for children, I would say 3 and under, screen time is rather harmful. Why? Because at that age, children learn through play. So we all know that play is what promotes what we call cognitive development. Yeah, speech, mobility, running around. I have a 1-year-old at the moment at home. He has had no screen time his whole life. And I made that a very key
Say
point.
Say that again?
Yeah, he has had no screen time. He's actually 1.5 years old. So another thing for my eldest, and maybe I can also add here a little tip. In my home, screen time is earned. It's an earned privilege. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there are certain things my 7-year-old must do in order to earn screen time. And he knows them. They're very simple. 2 things. 1 is physical movement. Get out there, hit a football, jump up a tree, climb a tree, do what you got to do. Yeah. And he knows. I mean, you don't have to tell a child how to play. This is innate. They know how to play. The second thing is mental exercise. Mind exercise leads to good mental health. Read, do creative writing, draw, paint, do whatever it is you feel you want to do. And let me tell you, Jagero, something magical happens. Absolutely magical, yeah? They don't even come and ask me for screen time after that, half the time, yeah? And they get so lost in their physical play, in their mental play. I mean, imagination, yeah? A child's imagination is so vast. So that is how they earn screen time. They know the two things they must do before they come and ask mommy for screen time.
But then, how do you make it happen between the two of you? Did you and the bride sit down and say, okay, this is how we are going to make the rules? How do you? Because sometimes I know that you as the mom can decide not to give the child the screen time. They run upstairs and they grab the dad's phone and they go doing this. How do you make sure that this rule applies everywhere in the house?
So this goes back again to discipline, yeah? And discipline in my eyes is freedom. Wherever we do not have discipline, and discipline, I'm not talking about the belt or caning. I'm talking about knowing that there are certain values and norms and rules. And kids thrive in environments where there are rules, yeah?
Is that so?
Yes. It's been proven in research, and we have enough research out there to say that kids thrive in structured homes. And by rules, because some of us might have PTSD of, having been told rule number 1, 2, 3. I just mean a structure, right? So it makes them feel psychologically safe and also emotionally safe. So yes, I sat down, with my husband, and I think most families should. You should have family meetings and bring the kids around, yeah? And we included our eldest, and we said, okay, how are we going to address this screen time? How do you think we should address it, yeah? And kids are very intuitive. Like they know where they're veering off the edge and when they are aligned. And it was fair. It was a fair and a democratic discussion. It wasn't just also the parents, especially if you have older kids, right? And you are going to change the rules of the house. And I think we fail to understand that children, if you empower them and listen to them, can actually self-regulate also. Yeah. So now the sacrifice you have to make, Jagero, is of course setting the foundation. So you can't just take the tablet off your daughter and you're there on your screen, right?
Yes.
It has to be a mutual...
That is working. That is working. She's not working.
A mutual, yeah, but even in what you're showing her, daddy cannot be on the screen from morning to sundown, because you know what will happen? She will become a teenager and you will start telling her, oh, you know what's happening? She won't even talk to you. By that point, you would have long lost her to her peers.
Yes.
You won't have the influence you need at the time you need it. So we need to start early. We need to understand that if you get it wrong in the first 7 years of a child's life, you'll be parenting your whole life. And by that, I mean that the real job of a parent is not to parent your whole child and adult child's life. Again, remember, we said we're here to raise autonomous humans who respect themselves and others with love and connection. So you want to empower your child to be able to parent themselves one day, to police themselves, to discipline themselves.
We have a situation whereby parents are telling their grown-up kids that, for how long am I going to do this for you? They keep coming back, and the father can't really tell the difference between when they were 7 years old and now they are 32 years old. They can't. Perhaps this could be the problem, that the parenting was lost somewhere when they were young.
Yeah, and I would even say some of us have helicopter parenting, right? Where literally like a helicopter, we are hovering around our children. I've had HR professionals come to me and tell me that the employees' parents have called them to not only negotiate their child's salary, but to even ask for certain, privileges. So imagine now I am a grown woman at work and my father is calling, or I'm 21, a new employee. My dad calls my job to ask about my salary. So we can see what happens when we overparent. And overparenting, much like most of us who have worked a lot and had these micromanaging bosses, right? You can imagine your boss doesn't let you send one email in peace, is calling you at 8:01 to check, did you arrive in the office? Have you clocked in? A lot of us are doing the opposite of what we want. If we want to raise autonomous children, we have to trust, after we have guided them enough, that they are able to make decisions for themselves. Simple thing, right? My child comes home and he tells me, we're all pushing our children to do different things, but he said, no, I don't want to do coding. I want to do cookery as an extra curriculum. Now, I heard what he said. I had to acknowledge that maybe coding was my wish for him, and I accepted it, yeah? And as young as he is, I'm showing him that, yes, I hear you, and yes, you know what is best for you. I'm only here to guide you. And what happens when we let our children make decisions is they learn through their own failures. And there's this great thing I like to say, yeah? If I do something and I fail at it, I will learn. If I do something that you tell me to do, I will resent you. And I'm seeing a lot of parent and child relationships that are built on resentment.
That's very interesting, because there is a time a lady came to my office and told as an intern, and I asked her, so you are in mass communication and journalism. Is it what you've always wanted to do? And up front she told me no. But she was here in my office, wanted to intern on mass communication and journalism.
Wow.
And I asked her, what did you want to do? She said, music. And why didn't you do it? Because my parents wouldn't pay for school fees for music. And they thought that it was not lucrative enough, or a career path that was good for the family. So I told her, so what is your plan? So he told me that my plan is to make money and go do what I want.
Wow. How sad. And then what happens if this girl fails in doing what she didn't want, right? And that's where now anxiety, depression, all of this suppressed emotions comes up. And I want to offer this great quote by this poet called Khalil Gibran. And he says, children do not belong to you. Children are life's longing for itself. Children come through you, they do not come for you. Most of us were raised with parents who used us as status symbols, who used us as a lifeline. I mean, we know this very well. Yeah, in African societies, my child is an engineer. Look at this degree. My child is a doctor. My child, what are we doing? We're using our children as status symbols for ourselves, right? Because my hope is that by Jagero being a doctor, he will uplift all of us, yeah, not just mommy, the whole community. It's not about you, right? And your mental, emotional well-being. So we have to really try to self-correct that, because it's creating a lot of mentally ill, mentally unwell people. Mental health costs us so much more than just our happiness. It's not about happiness. It's about being able to function. So I would offer this young girl who is doing it for the money that there is not only, money in this whole grand scheme of it. We need to have purpose. We need to feel fulfillment in order to stick at something long enough where we're able to get the rewards. And that's just, the nature of life.
It's interesting because I think somebody asked me why I'm only having one child, because I decided that I'm just going to have one child, and they were saying that, children will take care of you when you're old, So I don't know, but sometimes I feel like people take children as life insurance.
Yeah.
So that when you're old and you're 70 and you're soiling yourself, then the daughter or the son will send a caretaker or a caregiver to you. So I was telling somebody that, look, right now if I give birth at 41 years old, it means that I'm going to parent for another 28 years. by which time I will be 65. You know, even if I was looking for a life insurance, there's a better way of looking for life insurance. If I'm given a boom at 65 years old, that will be around, you know, who knows, 30 million in those years to come. And so, and then the other people say that I should get another child to take care of, to have a playmate. And I was telling them, imagine one of these, after some 20 years, this kid once comes to me and asks me, why was I born? And can I really face them and tell them that you were actually born to be a playmate of this one?
And you know what? You ask very, very key questions.
Yeah.
And I think we glamorize and romanticize parenting. I mean, the one friend who told me before I had my firstborn, who told me, parenting is like going to boot camp. If any of us have ever tried fitness boot camp, it's like going to boot camp and then being told you can never go back home. Okay? Parenting is the scariest hood, as they say. Parenthood is the scariest hood you will ever go through. So we need to also understand how challenging it is. And some of us don't have the capacity to parent. And by all means, parenting is not for everyone. I know we have these sometimes very toxic beliefs that just because, you know, you are fertile or able to sire a child, you should have one. But what is the implications on the child? And you're asking very key questions. And we don't sit down to reflect. This goes back to, again, self-awareness, yeah? And to challenge the narratives we were given ourselves, right? Because, again, maybe some of us saw our mothers unhappy, miserable, you know? And maybe you do think, gosh, if I wasn't here, maybe her quality of life would have actually been better. So is that a way that we want our kids to grow up?
Yeah.
So I really, really commend you for saying, look, if I know I may not have right now the mental, emotional capacity to parent a child, by all means, don't do it. Yeah? So, and we need to normalize this. I think especially in Kenya, in our society today, we need to normalize it. Because we certainly don't need more traumatized, unhealthy adults in a world that is already very complex and complicated. You know? And of course, we have free will, and we should have free will about this, because it's sort of like me forcing you to go to the gym, you know, every day and lift heavy weights. And, you know, some people don't want to do that, and it's fine.
Some people don't want to do that. You know, I don't know if I might be wrong, but the way, especially in Africa, for lack of a better word, I feel like we are having so many children that we can't take care of. You know, realistically, I have one child, and right now I can't even give her everything that she needs. You know, I've always wanted to buy her a piano. I want to buy her a drum set, the digital drum set, which is like 75,000. The piano, a good piano, will take me back around 125,000. The places I want to take her, even for holiday, I've always wanted to go with my child to Europe, you know, and show us all those beautiful places in Europe, or somewhere, you know, exotic like Angola or Malawi. You know, I can imagine taking 5 children there. It is so hard. Do you feel like sometimes we give birth to too many children in Africa?
So there are two things there, and maybe I'll start with the latter, yeah? Some of these things you mentioned, I wonder if it's a consequence of social media pressures, yeah?
Yeah.
My mother, for example, knew very well she wasn't my playmate and felt no shame in really not really playing with me, right? Today's parents, we tend to feel if I can't take my child to, Angola or to Dubai, and I can't buy them this and I can't give them that, then what am I doing as a parent? Am I failing? And really, again, going back to the basics, right? That our child is there and all they want to do is feel loved and connected and happy to be in our presence. So it's not about money. I know a lot of people will say it is, and I'm going to say it's not just about money. Of course, we need our basic needs met. But we have neglected in African societies to understand what emotional needs are of a child. To hear my dad say, I love you, I'm proud of you, to give me a hug when I come home and I've been bullied at school, to give me that time to express myself, to give me tools that allow me to learn how do I communicate those difficult emotions without being judged, yeah? This is what we need to be doing as African parents, yeah? And it's not about saying, oh, you know, my kids are soft, my kids are weak, no. Your kids are human, okay? They're human. And then the first part about are we having too many kids? You know, we cannot escape the fact that for so long, what you said, right? Kids were our investment.
Yes.
So we got into a culture of the more kids we had, you know, is the more likelihood that some of the kids would A, survive, yeah? Just basic survival, and then B, would amount to something that would now help not only our family, but even the community at large. And we have also sometimes some religious influences that kind of say, go forth and populate the world, right?
Yes.
So we have all people on that spectrum. So we are holding on sometimes, yes, to beliefs that there was a reason historically for it, but maybe are no longer serving us. Because right now where you are, for example, Jagero, is, you know, you are at a stage where you are actualizing. You know, I wouldn't put you in survival mode right now, you know, but for a long time, our grandparents were in survival mode. And literally, we needed workers. We needed people to work the shamba. And that's not the case today. So yes, we need to consciously prepare women. And that's something also I do, especially young women. In my case, you know, becoming a mother was quite traumatic because there was no village. There was no community. I have a family all over the world, right? So grandma could not be there all the time. I have no sisters. Yeah, I only have brothers. So, and everybody's out living their own life. So I tell a lot of women today, like, yes, if you want children, you must be prepared for taking on more responsibility. And if you are able to now, you know, also going back to the finances, be a bit more financially settled, then you can afford more help, because now we pay for help, right? That's why we have nannies, house helps, daycare, play groups, right? That's where now we have had to invest more because we do not have our communities anymore. So back then when grandma says, I had 5 kids, what are you crying about? Yeah, grandma could leave her kids out there, yeah, to go fetch water, and they would play the whole day and swim in the river. I can't do that with my children.
Pressure of parenting online. Where is, you know, as a status symbol, where is your child going to school? Riara,
Yeah.
you know, Daystar University, USA University. Where are you going for holiday this Christmas? We are going to Mombasa. We are going to Seychelles. We are going to, you know, all these places. What do you think this does to parents that are not able to afford it and being ashamed of where your child is, you know?
It's very, very tricky. I think, and we see this across the board, right? Parents in relationship goals and parent goals and everybody's goals. But again, I invite you to remember these are highlights of someone's life. Yeah, I know so many people who come from very affluent families, but you look at the internal family dynamics and you say, well, money didn't solve that, did it? It didn't solve the neglect. It didn't solve the abuse. It didn't solve, you know, the addictions. So we again have to look at what contributes to a child's welfare, what contributes to healthy children. Trips to Dubai do not. While they're nice, they do not, you know. Buying your child certain things do not. And I would also argue and challenge us in saying, you know, what is a good school? We see a movement of fantastic homeschooling happening, right? It's not for everyone, but we have to remove this idea that because I send my child to some amazing school, they will learn how to be successful in life. I would argue that you as the parent have more to teach your child about life skills, yeah? About resilience, about discipline, about morals, about values, about self-worth than any school will ever do, right? So we need to remove ourselves more, again, from social media images and unfollow. Every month I go through my media and I look at who do I need to unfollow. And sometimes those are those moms that you see who have 4 boys who are doing amazing, micromanagement. Like in a day, they achieve 10 things, highly productive. And I realized, well, that's not serving me, is it? Like, I only have 2 children, but if this woman has 4 and she's able to go to the gym, cook, run a whole business, be there for dinner, it's not serving me as a parent. So we must also realize what kind of content we need to consume.
It's very interesting because some people would say that is jealousy, but it's very, I feel like I have unfriended some people that are living a life that I think is not for me. And it's, even though you might decide that this is not going to put me under pressure, but seeing it every day does something to you, and you want to say, well, no, I don't want to see you every day taking these meals in planes and going to these places and keep doing this every day, and it's not making sense to me.
I mean, yeah, I agree. And what I've come to realize, because I have met, and I'm not talking about specific influencers, because again, mommy influencers exist, daddy influencers exist. But when you sit with a lot of, them, they're human beings, right? They do a lot of good and a lot of bad and a lot of wrong. But what are they showing? So now what we see is a trend towards more relatable videos, right? The mama crying in the parking lot. The dad who, brings his son or daughter to work because, the babysitter bailed on him. We see a lot of big following around real stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if a child is not, because you might not have done it correctly at the beginning, and you can see that this child is slipping through my fingers. I am not able to contain them. They don't like me, apparently. They are just in my house because I am the only one who can provide the shelter and provide the food and provide everything that they need. How do you begin to get back the child to you?
I think children are very intuitive, right? So they appreciate the honesty of a parent. I remember in my case, my dad is very old now. He's in his 70s. But he always tells me, wow, when he looks at me, parent, I wish I knew what I'm seeing you do right now. And I'm sorry. Simply saying I am sorry because I did not know. Having that conversation with your child and saying, look, I probably screwed up big time. Yeah. I did this, I did that, or I was completely out my mind. Will you forgive me? Start a conversation apologizing and acknowledging what you've done. Because then at least it shows your child that I am learning. We're on this journey together. It is not a power fight, This is not about fighting or disciplining your child to submission. This is about saying, teach me more about you. I want to learn more about you. Will you allow me to be in spaces where you are so I can better understand who you are? And humility, humility is a key skill.
Yes.
That as parents, we fail to embrace. I go back to my young little kids, whether 1-year-old, 7, I go back and I say, I'm sorry. Wow, I lost my temper. I was angry. I didn't want to shout at you, but I was so overwhelmed. And doing this repeatedly, all the way, my child gets to understand mommy's human. Mommy has big feelings too. Mommy has big emotions, but she's able to come back and repair. And I always say the true test of any relationship is not when it's going well. It's how well do we repair when we make mistakes. So that's a key lesson and a valuable lesson for any parent who is listening right now and has maybe felt, I've lost my teenager, I've lost my child, is to start from the approach of, how do you feel about that as a parent? And how do you think you contributed? Because we like to project and blame. My child isn't listening. My child is doing what they want. My child is engaging in dangerous behavior. But that child, is a byproduct of your actions, right? So we must take accountability. Yeah.
There are myths about parenting. Do you know some of them and how and what is really factual in as far as research and science?
Yeah. So I think one of the key myths, and I think I mentioned it earlier, is this idea, which it sounds very esoteric, but we take our kids to belong to us, that they're a reflection of me. And therefore, we don't give them the space to discover who they are or the room to grow into who they're meant to be. So that is a myth that our children are ours. We are guides, and I think it was the great, that guru, Sadhguru, who said, we are not really here to raise children, right? You raise cattle. We're here to guide our children. So this is a key thing. I think a second myth is that, being authoritarian, being an authoritative figure is how we get our children to comply. Children are extremely smart. Yeah, from birth, even within the womb, they're smart.
Yeah.
If you talk to your child in the womb, they'll come out and they already, you can see, are just able to grasp so much. So we need to understand, yes, we need structures, but again, we need buy-in. When you're running a company, Jagero, do you just order your employees what to do? Yeah. You have meetings, you sit down, you ask, what are your aspirations or not? What is your contribution or not? When we make children part of the family, not soldiers that need to align and listen to the commands, we raise smarter, better behaved children, by the way, and children who are more confident and have critical thinking skills. And that's what you need to survive in this world.
As we come close to this conversation, the balance between freedom and discipline. There are people who believe that a child has to be hit or belted or whipped, and others say that just talk to them. Where is the balance? Spare the rod and.
So again, parenting is a social experiment, And now, obviously, from research, we know these are things that produce better results and worse results. And, belting is in the category of it doesn't tend to produce good results, okay? Now, does it mean that we will never give a bum or spank our child ever again?
Yeah.
Probably not, because we're human and we're flawed, But I think it's important, like I said, is how do you communicate to your child? And another thing is what I call natural consequences, For example, my child leaves the light on all the time, and I tell him, come on, turn off the light. The power bills are crazy. So what do? I remove the bulb from the ceiling. He comes into his room, there's no light. Today there's no light. And why was that? That's a natural consequence from me telling you 7 times to turn off the light, right? We can think of natural consequences, and that actually is a better preparation for our children for the world they're going out into. For example, you don't study for your quiz. You had a quiz. You come home the next day, you failed it. I need to let him learn what failure is. You failed it, You didn't study, you failed it. I wasn't going to sit in there for you.
Yeah.
Now what are you going to do? So we are able to give our kids natural consequences. That is a much better teacher than showing them, oh, daddy can't control himself, so he's taking it out on me by belting me, and screaming at me. So what is my child likely to do? They'll either take that out on another child, which we find with bullies, oftentimes bullies are bullied by their parents.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, most bullies who have learnt this way from somewhere. So when we see children who are bullying bullies, we know most of the time what type of home environments they come from. When you see a child who's quick to knock you out or punch you in the playground, we know what kind of homes, what have they seen? So, by all means, you go ahead and belt your child, but don't be surprised with the output.
Amazing conversation. I really love that conversation that we had with you, about an hour. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
I think this discussion is not yet over. We can have another chat, and talk about a lot of other, specific ways, because I think you don't only a specialist in parenting, but in psychology and how people behave and how they should go about their life, in a better way.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right, people of the internet, thank you very much for tuning into this episode, Parenting with Ankiza, right?
Yeah.
Gakunu.
Gakunu.
Yeah. So if you like this episode, please, if you have a question, you can always raise it. You can comment. We can always go back to Ankiza and ask her those questions, and he can give us the answers. All right. Please follow us on Instagram, Facebook, X, which was called Twitter, and Facebook. Until another episode, thank you for now, and bye.